Welcome everyone to the Young Leaders Discovery session. I'd like to thank you for attending and giving up your time. We've got people registered from 3 different time zones, from Western Australia, Queensland and Victoria. So we want to keep it narrow because I'm in Victoria at the moment, so it's after school. I'm not going to be interrupted, whereas other people, there's interruptions. So we'll make sure it goes for no more than 30 minutes. So I'm Michael Gross. I'm been in education for a long time. I was a primary teacher for 15 years, and part of that was a curriculum consultant. For the last 30 years, I've worked for myself in the education field. I've worked with parents, helping parents understand and get the best out of their kids. I've worked with teachers, helping teachers work with kids, and also work with parents as well. And also I've been really fortunate to work with students, mainly in primary schools, and really that's been about student leadership, and began as sort of how to get the best out of kids. So I've been in education for a long time. If you can see the colour of my hair, I've been involved for a very long time. I won't say how many years. So the Young Leaders program, which is why you're here to find out more about it, and this is what this session's about. It's not a how to lead kids. I'm often asked a lot of questions about the Young Leaders program. It's available online. It's a sort of curriculum package, and I get a lot of questions. So we're running this discovery session just to answer some of those questions. So I'll chat for sort of 20 minutes or so, maybe even a little bit less. No slides, it's just me talking, and give you a chance to ask any questions. And the idea is to be fairly clear towards the end of it, what the program is about and what it might mean for your school, putting it into place. So it began 20 years ago. So the concept is my own, and that began when I worked with students in leadership areas. I also moved into speaking. So as a professional speaker, I moved in and I used to run speaking lessons and speaking sessions for school leaders. So we get a bunch of school leaders together in the late 90s, and we'd run a whole bunch of speaking activities. And the idea was to get these kids speaking, because presentations, communications is such a huge part of leadership. And it gradually, because all the kids who came along were leaders, so it morphed into a leadership program as things do. So as I was a strong curriculum consultant, I came up with the concept of a program about 20 years ago. So the concept of Young Leaders is my own. Most of the activities and the sessions have been designed by teachers in consultation with me. It's been redesigned 3 times. When I say redesigned, it's been updated with a new look 3 times. The last time it was done in 2020, so about 18 months ago, with a lovely new look, new activities, and a new building block as well, which fits more, I guess, with the times. It's followed me where I've worked in different places. So we've had schools in the United States, in the United Kingdom, quite a lot in Singapore, the English-speaking schools in Singapore, New Zealand, and Australia over a period of time as well. So what is the Young Leaders program, and what's its purpose? Well, it's a program which fits into schools in the last 2 years of primary school, because we've got schools in Queensland, for example, who have their last 2 years of primary school are different names than say Victoria and New South Wales. So we always just say the last 2 years of primary school. It has 3 objectives. Firstly, it's to develop leadership literacy. One of the things I noticed working with kids in this sort of leadership space is they had no idea what leadership was about. To be quite truthful, adults sometimes struggle with what leadership's about. So it's about helping kids understand what it is to be a leader, what it is to lead, and developing a language and some concepts around leadership. Now, obviously, leadership for kids is different than leaderships for adults. One of the conversations that adults will have around leadership is this management or is this leadership? Is this strategy or is this operational? For kids, don't think quite that way. It's more operational. So you'll notice when I go through the building blocks, one of those building blocks is you go, oh, hang on, that's management. No, that's fits into a student leadership framework. The other thing, why I think it's important to develop some literacy in upper primary school, and also kids' skills in upper primary school. Developmentally, they're really ready for it. We tend to leave it mainly to secondary schools. That's where a lot of programs are put in place. And a lot of the work done in primary schools has been more around, we've got some school captains. We better train them. We better do a couple of hours on whatever it is. Now, I know programs have changed since then, but that's what we want to do, is build literacy. The second is to develop leadership potential in kids. Not just for all kids, but not just for the better kids or the kids who are elected or selected, but for all children and young people. And I think this fits in this time and place really well, because now we've moved into a space of small families, and kids often don't get an opportunity to put into place some leadership type things in their family of origin now. We tend to have 1 and 2 child families. 3 tends to be a bigger family in this day and age. So you'll find a cohort of kids moving through who aren't practicing a lot of what they used to practice in families gone by. And the last aspect of it is, and to me it's the most important aspect, and it's the aspect which I picked up. Again, I picked it up in English schools, actually, when I worked around, and I realised that there was a couple of schools there who just did things so well. I mean, the kids were terrific. They spoke well, there was leadership happening. And one of the things I worked out was they had a mentoring program. They had it in their culture. This is the way we do things around here. So I want to develop schools to develop a leadership culture. So often schools will think, oh, great, we've got a great cohort of year 5s or year 6s this year. It's going to be great. So how do we move away from that notion of we'll wait for the good cohort? So culture is the very notion of, I define it as the way that we do things around here when no one's looking. We pick up papers when not, because that's what we do in here. We behave in certain ways because that's what we do. So one of the ways you can circulate that is by mentoring. So modeling and mentoring is really important. And so what happens often in the end of primary schools is kids will leave and a new lot come in, and the learnings are not passed on to those who've been there, which is an absolute waste. So, and we know that mentoring is one of the fastest ways for human beings to move from one place to another, to learn, and modeling as well. So modeling often is, we say to kids, be a good role model, but what does it mean? So one of the things we do in the program is really get kids to understand and nut out what it is to be a role model, and what are their strengths, what are they modeling. So they're the 3 things that the program's about. It's developing leadership literacy, leadership potential in kids, and it's also has the aim of developing a leadership culture. So how does it do it? I think the strength in it is that it has 5 timeless building blocks. I use the word timeless because they're evergreen. They're less fashionable. They'll be in sometimes I look at schools and some of the programs and the terminologies and the frameworks we use will go in and out of fashion. These won't go in and out of fashion. They've been around a long time. One's been added. So the building blocks are simply presentation skills, and presentation skills is about how do you communicate. It's not just standing up and delivering a speech, it's how you present yourself. The second is responsibility. In an adult term, responsibility is about integrity. Kids don't get integrity, but they get responsibility. It's a term that's very concrete to them, and that's about character. So behind each building block is a larger concept. So responsibility is the second building block. Can't really teach that, but you can introduce that and you can reinforce that. Organisation is the third angle, and organisation about getting stuff done. If you're a leader, you've got to get stuff done. So the organisation is that, where I said earlier, sometimes we mix up the management. Is this management or is this leadership? Well, organisation is probably a management concept, but it fits into student leadership because it's something the kids get, and it's about planning ahead. The fourth building block is teamwork. How do I work together? How do I build a team? And the teamwork is about cooperation. How do I get some cooperation? Often I've worked with leaders, and I used to have a lot of fun when I used to run a relay with kids who are leaders, particularly, and you find all the house captains that want to win the relay, and then you change the rules on them and say, you don't win the relay, the whole 4 of you take off together and run a lap, and you don't win until the last one finishes. And so, they go, oh, right, okay, I've got to go back and encourage that one who's not so just because I'm the best doesn't, oh, right, oh, okay, that doesn't make me a leader. Right, a leader means I've got to do other things. So building teamwork is when we work together. So that's about cooperation. The notion of organisation, I said, is about capacity building. And the last is emotional intelligence. And that's the latest building block which we added. And one of the reasons we added that are for two reasons. A lot of leaders are actually experience anxiety. If you go back to your schools and look at them, there's a fair chance that most of the leaders or kids in leadership positions are firstborns. They're highly anxious and they need to actually have some skills to manage their anxiety. So that regulation and that being able to recognise and regulate how they feel. And the other aspect is that good leaders from an adult perspective and an adolescent perspective and a kid's perspective, good leaders will read the room. They'll read how others are feeling. They'll get the whole notion of, she may be angry. Probably not a good time to go and say X. So, and that's about control. So that's not trying to get kids to control others, but it's about controlling their emotions and controlling the story and the narrative in which they're in. So the 5 building blocks, as I say, are pretty much timeless. The presentation skills, responsibility, organisation, teamwork, emotional intelligence. They're easy to reinforce. Schools do that anyway. And so it's easy to teach those as building blocks and then to reinforce them in different ways. So one of the things I'd like to make a comment about is sometimes I've worked with schools and say, we do a bit of that. Yeah, you do a social and emotional learning program and a bit of that fits into that. Yeah, I get that, but that's not leadership. So this is putting a box around leadership and saying this is what leadership is. And it's not the only framework, but it's a framework which we use because, again, it works. So I'm often asked the question, does it fit my school? I'm going to say yes to that, largely when I look at the fact that we have schools from every state who are young leaders schools in Australia, and we have schools who are big schools, small schools, Catholic schools, government schools, and independent schools. We also have rural and we have city schools. So we've had 3 schools join up this week. Interesting at the time of the year for that to happen. We've got 3 schools joined up this week. We've got a P12 from rural Victoria. We've got a public primary school from a regional town in New South Wales and a Catholic school in metropolitan Melbourne. So that's pretty typical of the sorts of schools we get. And also, interestingly, what we do get is we get a lot of schools, and we found out last year, we rang a lot of our schools who joined the year before. And one of the questions we asked was, where are you on your leadership journey? And that was sort of not so much why did you to come on board, but where were you when you came on board? And we had a wide variety. We had some people who said, basically, we have some school leaders, we elect them, we send them off for a day or they get a speaker in for a day, and that's about it. All the way through to schools had fairly sophisticated programs that looked after, that taught leadership to all kids. They did some work with the selected and elected leaders. They had a really good system of electing leaders, etc. So, all the way along the spectrum, schools sort of be able to slot in. It was quite amazing. So I might take this moment to just ask you guys, or maybe you can put it in the chat, or maybe you can just let yourself off mute and say, what are you doing? Where are you on your student leadership journey in your school at the moment? This is one of the things I do when I work with kids, because when we used to put them into place and say, get them to come up and speak, we would never tell them to. We would create the space because leaders actually grab initiative. So it's interesting to see who would come in and take the space. So I'll practice what the program practices. So I won't say who should, just the space is there.
Hi, Michael. I'll go first.
Great. Thanks, Lyndall.
We are at MacKillop College here in Cairns. We have only just recently had year 6 for the last couple of years. And what we do is with our year 5s, we tend to start talking about some of those key phrases or literacies, as you might say. But your point about being specific was a good one. I'd used your program before at a previous school I worked with, but not obviously the updated one. So I knew this was coming up and was so glad to hear that it's been updated, because we're looking for something now for all of our year sixes, and then for the those that have got the additional responsibility of, say, house captains, and to continue that mentoring. I think in terms of the prayer space, if you like, or what have you in a Catholic school, there's a lot of mentoring that happens with me working with the students, but not in other areas. So this is more a generic take on that, I would think.
Okay, thank you. Just on that, we've created a little mentoring framework, which was you need to be experienced being mentored. So you're a mentee, you're a mentor. Then there's a legacy. So it's working out what your legacy might be. And the legacy would be, what do you want to be remembered for? And what qualities do you want to be remembered for? And then the last is learnings. It's pass the learnings back on to the next group. And there are activities there. So when kids have a mentor, there's some activities they've got to do with their mentor. So it's not just go out and find a mentor and follow them. There's some structure there as well. So thanks, Lyndall. It sounds like we've got a convert, right? So, and anyone else?
Michael, I'm happy to talk about our leadership structure. So I've been at the school for 8 years at St Martin's, but they've had some very traditional roles within the school in terms of school leaders, which traditionally are the year 6 students. There are other areas where there's leadership in the school in other year levels, like fire carriers in grade 5. But this has been an evolving space for us. So we've got our school captains and the deputies, house captains, RE captains, sustainability captains, arts captains, which is inclusive of performing arts and music. So each of these areas, their role descriptions are growing per se, and we have aligned them to a specific staff member so that they're working closely with that mentor as you described. Yep. But I think what's missing for us is some of that groundwork in the skill development for those leaders, but also the opportunity to work with all students at particular levels to enable them to gather those skills and therefore align with those pathways that the formal leadership structure that is already in place. And we also, we've dabbled with, student representative councils per se. Last year was a student taking action research team that were working on particular projects around the school. So there's a few things happening, and I suppose what we're searching for is something with a little bit more structure that will complement what we're currently doing.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Jamie. If I look at where we are, you're a fair way down the track. If we've got 0 up here and 10 down there, you're a fair way down the track. And sounds like, Lyndall, your school is as well, which is great. All right. Look, I'll move on because I said at times at a bit of a premium. I just want to sort of answer what sets this program apart from the fact that there's very few structured leadership programs in primary schools. In fact, as far as I know, there aren't any others, but I could be corrected. One of the things which is really find interesting about this is that in year 5, we introduced it's personal leadership. We differentiate between personal leadership and public leadership. So in the first section 1 of the program, we talk about those building blocks and we introduce them all, but very much in a personal sense. So, presentation skills is how do you hold a conversation? How do you hold eye contact? Do you lean? Do all this sort of thing. So it's getting kids to if we want kids to present well in public, then they need to present well in a personal space. Responsibility, if you want them to take responsibility, they need to actually take responsibility for their own things. If you want them to be organized, they need to be organized in their own, time, space, etc. if you want kids to have good teamwork, they need to have some good friendship skills and good social skills. So we introduced that in the first section. In the second section, we build on that with public leadership. So what's one of the reasons why we've figured that often kids who move into leadership positions are a little bit better prepared because they've focused on these things in the second last year of primary school, or even the last year. And so it gets teachers, our feedback is it gets teachers focusing on kids as well. So it's not always lessons, so the actual lessons for the year fives or the part 1, there's 8 lessons. So I reckon you do that in about a month, two lessons. And then in the year 6 or the last year, there's 7. 2 of them are overt lessons, and the others 4 of them are projects. 2 of them the kids do at home, and a couple of them the kids have actually got to do some things together in teams. They've got to organise, they've got to choose what they're going to organise, got to work in a team. Then they self-assess after that. And so it's not the most time-consuming program, but it actually sets it up as a framework, and teachers can build on that. So the second thing is that it's 3 programs in one, which I've just mentioned. That it's personal leadership is part 1, public leadership is part 2, and then I liken that to a Bachelor of Education for teachers. You know, everyone gets a foundation, and the Masters of Educational Leadership is the part 3, which is mentoring and induction. So we have a planned induction program which takes about 5 hours for all kids. And I just say that's for all kids who are elected or are selected as leaders, and they become part of a team as well. So all those people you mentioned, Jamie, would be part of a team, part of a leadership team. And then they might cross and do things, you know, with each other as well. Just because you're leading the bin monitor doesn't mean you do other things as well. And then we have this year-long support mechanism for kids. So it does need a teacher to look out for it. It's where the mentoring occurs. They meet once a term, or could be less than that if you wish, or more often than that. But they meet and they relook at their roles and they see how things are going. One of the issues which often comes up with kids are, what are my limits? What are my boundaries? You know, they often come up with conflict as well. So how do we deal with that? So it gives those kids a really good opportunity to you know, really get stuck into what leadership's about. The other thing which sets us apart is emotional intelligence, which is new. So I got this out of Yale. I spent a bit of time at Yale Centre for Emotional Intelligence, and I spent time in some schools in New York, and they use a thing called an emotional intelligence charter or an emotional intelligence agreement. So they don't have classroom rules or school rules. They have emotional intelligence charter, and basically it's the classroom figures out, how do I want to feel when I come into school? Number 2 question is, what are the behaviors which will enable me to make those feelings and feel positive when I'm at school? And the 3rd question is, what happens when I don't feel safe and when those behaviors are impacted or my feelings are impacted? So how do we deal with conflict? So there's a whole session about template about going through that, and that's really quite powerful. And then kids do a lot. We use the thing called a feelings finder, where kids will recognize their feelings and they sort of find them on this feelings finder. So there's a bit of work around that, which I think is terrific. The last thing what sets it apart is that it comes with everything: the manual, the workbooks, there's assessment activities now, there's learning activities, there's certificates, and there's letters to go home to parents, etc. I guess the other thing that sets it apart is that it does focus on leadership as opposed to some other programs. Looks like this now. So that's the new design. Comes in a box, and in that box, there we go. It's in that box is. I'll open it up first off. There's booklets. There's 3 booklets which look like that, and the booklet has the workbook. Part of it is a workbook. The teacher manual, and the second part is a workbook. And the workbook is basically so that it's for kids. So if I was to look at, so that's an example of a page for the kids' workbook, for example. That's the legacy. What is it? Leaving a legacy. there. So that's part of the kids are asked to what's their contribution going to be and what are the qualities that they want to be remembered for. And our building blocks sort of looks like that as well. So that's part again of the workbook for kids. And as very similar, there's also that's included in the manual. So whatever the kids get, the teachers get. There's a quick start guide, so it enables teachers to quickly get it and look at it. And the lessons are pretty much structured, fairly simply structured. What else it comes with is our cards. We've got about 30 leadership values. The front one there is empathetic. So that's there for some of the activities which kids will do. We also, as I move over to my wall, and there's 5 leadership posters, which are quite generic. So that's teamwork. We work on mindsets. So the mindset for teamwork is, we work together, and there's 3 aspects. It's cooperate with each other, encourage others, and accept all members. That's what leaders do when we're involved in the teamwork building block. Now, the best thing about that is it comes with this little baby, a UHB. So everything I just showed you is on a UHB, so you can print it up for different classes. So if you've got multiple classes, 1 box is probably enough if you've got this. And so, multiple workbooks as well. So everything which I just showed you comes in that. So, and interesting enough, we are registered with Copyright Agency Limited Australia, which means that when you invest in that program, you also get the photocopyable, or you get the rights to reproduce. They're not photocopyable rights, they're reproducible rights. Got to be careful of wording there. The reproducible rights as well, and there's no time limit on that. And the program is, we've tried to make it affordable. It's $999. And
sorry, Michael, can you repeat that amount? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. It's $999. So we've kept it less than 1,000. Parents are important to us. So for the month of February, as a little incentive, we've included 6 of my parenting books as a little parenting pack valued at $150 or more than that, really. So that's there as a little incentive. We found that a lot of schools use it over a period of time. So, if you use it for 5 years, that's an investment for us, $200 a year. And if you've got 2 grade 5s, 2 grade 6s, that works out to be sort of $2 a child for each year. So we believe it's very affordable. And that's enough about that. So you'll get it on the website. So it's all on the website, and purchase it through the website. There's also samples on the website to go and have a look at. So what I showed you, you can see a sample of a lesson plan. You can see a sample of a workbook, etc. And a lot of some of the questions you may have too are answered. We've got a Q&A question on the website. So that's it for me now. Now I'm happy to just take a question or two from you. I see we've got about 8 minutes left, so we don't have to go through to 8 minutes, but we have 8 minutes.
Michael, does your website have other existing schools that have used the program? Do you reference anyone else so that we could, potentially give them a call and ask them about how they've been using it in their school?
Yeah, we don't put them up, but I'm happy to send through some schools for you after this. There's one school which is, I've got 6 testimonials. If you have a look on and it's a slider on it. One of them's a school, and they're more than happy to phone them up and speak to them. It's a primary school in Melbourne. So maybe I'll leave that with you. If you want to know more, email me. It's michaelgross@icloud.com is my personal, michaelgross@icloud.com, and I shall send you through some schools that you could, which are like for like.
Thank you.
If there's anything I haven't really answered or anything you...
I suppose all I wanted clarity. I think it's probably obvious, but it's just that opportunity to take from it work activities that you can do whole level and expose the children to good teaching practice to share, because my experience is feeling like you get the children at the end and you start working with them then, as opposed to the investment in the younger years as they prepare, so that when they line up, as you gave the example of giving the public speaking, when they're lining up to do that, they have the confidence, they have the skills and capabilities to be able to do that with confidence, or even without confidence, but actually have the skills to be able to work through that. Just that opportunity to tap in at earlier years.
Yep. All right. So there is no program which would taps into earlier years, but I suggest if you establish a program at the top, then other teachers can work towards that as well. So yes, there is a gap there for another program. While we stuck with 5 and 6s, it is recognised that schools are now focusing on primary leaders in those years. But certainly there's nothing to stop those building blocks, almost being top down, working up towards them. And it probably makes a point as well is, when do you start this? When do you do this? One of my learnings is that schools will do it often how it suits them, which is fine. One of the schools I spoke with, they run their year 5. They run the part 1 in December at year 5, which I think is a little bit too late. And then when those year 5s go into year 6, they run part 2 at the start of year 6. So what they're missing is setting up a platform for those kids who move into student leadership positions, but that suits them. My way we'll be doing it would be to pick a term earlier in the year. So whether it's March might be a reasonable time, do it for a month in March. We've set that language up, we set the concepts up, and then you focus on it throughout the year and do something similar in year 6. And then so you've got almost the whole year to reinforce those concepts. And when kids go and give presentations, it's part of it, they've actually got to self-assess as well now. And so they might go back and self-assess and go, well, yeah, I did, when I gave that presentation, I did X, Y, or whatever it might be, so they can refer back to that as well. So I think early in the year is better. But I mean, schools do things differently. There's a crowded curriculum. And one of the things we wanted with this is not to crowd the curriculum with more stuff, but just to create some frameworks and building blocks which schools could work and build on. My wife's a teacher, and she always reminds me about that. Keeps my feet on the ground. All right. Well, look, if there's no further questions, I'd really like to thank everyone for attending this session. I hope it's been worthwhile. I'm sold on the program. I think it's fantastic. Our research, when I say our research, our conversations with schools tell us that the schools who use it continue to use it. It doesn't take much to put into place. And the other interesting bit of feedback we got was from secondary schools, who they say they can often tell kids who move into secondary school from schools who've had the Young Leaders program, which to me is a terrific marker and a terrific tick. Anyway, I leave you with that. Any more information, you can contact me through the website. I'm always happy to engage in conversations about leadership and student leadership and anything else for that matter. So thanks very much for attending. I appreciate you giving up your valuable time.
Thanks, Michael.